Well, the House is now adjourned until 10 p.m. Eastern when lawmakers will return. They'll be on their 14th ballot. That's when we'll find out if McCarthy does indeed finally have the votes needed to become elected Speaker. Now, McKay Coppins is a staff writer with the Atlantic. Kadia Goba is a political reporter at Semafor. Thank you both for being with us. So, I guess Groundhog Day, that's where we're at right now. Kadia, you're in the House right now. You've been watching all of this unfold all day. Kevin McCarthy says, as you just heard, he believes he now has the votes to win. Could this finally be over tonight?
Yeah, I think so. A few members of Congress suggested that yesterday they were in some of their final rounds of negotiations and that we would probably see a change today, but they said it was going to be a two-part series, that there were probably going to be a few holdouts and then that would extend to a second vote. So that's exactly where we are at this point. He has 6 holdovers, and we're waiting to see how this unfolds, whether they vote present or don't show up to lower the threshold or whatever.
Or whatever, exactly. I guess we'll find out at 10 o'clock Eastern. McKay, you know, this is now the longest Speaker election since before the Civil War. What do you think it reveals about how a Republican-controlled Congress will operate for the next couple of years here?
Yeah, I think...
in a way... Oh, go ahead, Kadia.
So I was just going to suggest that they've been pushing that parity and, you know, they just want, you know, the caucus or the conference to be more diverse. But I mean, to me, it signals to a lot of the country that the far flank is a little more in control, whether they execute that or they don't accomplish that. I think that'll be the appearance. I mean, but to be honest, remember there's the Senate, and the Senate is a Democratic-led Senate, and then the president has veto power. So there are going to be a lot of messaging bills, and, you know, I think it'll be a grand stage for people on the right flank.
McKay, do you think they can get some work done once they find a Speaker?
It remains to be seen. To me, this whole spectacle is the culmination of a story that goes back, you know, really decades. And you could pinpoint the beginning of it to the rise of Newt Gingrich, maybe to more recently the Tea Party movement, which is a right-wing populist movement that flooded Congress about a decade ago with kind of rabble-rousing insurgents. But basically, the people who have been causing this to happen, the holdouts in the Republican caucus, are operating under a theory of power that sees obstruction and dysfunction as legitimate tools to accumulate and wield power, right? That they basically see the regular functioning of the government as a bartering chip that they can use to extract demands. And in the case of this particular story, you have a coalition of people with a bunch of different demands that range from procedural reforms in the House to decentralize the power of the Speaker, to people who are kind of making broader points about fiscal discipline for the federal government. And all of them are basically using the fact that they don't have a Speaker, and that basically every thinking normal person in the House desperately wants to get a Speaker so that they can get back to a regular government. They're using that fact as a point of leverage for them to extract demands. And it's a really unhealthy way for one of the chambers of Congress to operate. And I worry about the precedent that it sets going forward.
And that is the next question, right? I mean, you're right. There's not one simple demand that everybody has. It's kind of this disparate group with all these different kind of hodgepodge of demands. And one of those demands is to change a rule which would allow changing the Speaker to be easier, and one member to push a motion to do that. And the reporting is that McCarthy has actually agreed to make this concession. You know, he has said that his father always said it's not about how you start the game, it's how you finish the game. But if you finish the game and you're the weakest Speaker in history, what does that say about the game that you've played? Kadia, I'll put that to you.
Yeah, and I want to make a note about all these hodgepodge requests. the one thing that changed in the rules package from my reporting is that is the single one thing. It's a major thing, but specific to McCarthy. So what you just explained, now the House will have the option to bring, one person will be able to bring a motion to vacate, to basically a vote of no confidence against the speaker, both on the Republican or the Democrat side. So I think it's very interesting. He did give a lot of power in that sense. However, I think some of the more frustrating reporting or trying to talk to these members is trying to get exactly what their demands were in the negotiation, or how anything changed from day one of the vote series, and we haven't been able to establish that. So I think I think that's very interesting to see, like, how, I guess, unorganized maybe they are,
Yeah.
and how some of this is messaging. What people are going to remember, no matter what, is that this faction of the party disrupted things to the point where it delayed Congress for a week.
And he has degraded his position when he becomes, if he becomes Speaker, McKay. Could we potentially see musical chairs here if he is even sworn in as Speaker and he has that gavel? If one person can then move a motion to replace him?
I mean, you've got to wonder, if you're Kevin McCarthy, is this job worth having if you're kept on this tight of a leash, right?
Yeah.
You're basically in a situation where one false move, one, disruption of Congress, one failed bill could lead to you losing your job, right?
Yeah.
And that has not been how Congress has functioned up to this point. The scenario that you just laid out is an interesting one. It is one I've heard people talking about, that what in 2 years, if we look back and we can name 6 different speakers, how surprised will you be? I don't think that's really likely, but it's not impossible with this rules change. And that's why I think Kadia is right, that he gave up an enormous amount of power by agreeing to that. And you could argue that it kind of hobbles him going into this job, if indeed he is finally confirmed.
McKay, I got a question for Kadia, but before I let you go, do you think he gets it tonight? Do you see that happening?
Your guess is as good as mine. It does seem like there's finally been movement, and the dissenters have been shaken loose. I could see it happening tonight, but I won't venture a guess. I could see either outcome playing out.
Okay, all right. And Kadia, I want to switch gears now with you for the final question here. Today is, of course, the 2nd anniversary of the attack on Capitol Hill. You were in the Capitol on that day. How do you reflect on that day years later?
Well, just 2 years later, I could say this year was better than last year. I remember there was a moment of silence in the Capitol or the chamber, and that was a little emotional. I don't think I felt the impact between that time, but interestingly enough, I didn't remember it was January 6th until yesterday. I didn't realize it was January 6th. So, I mean, this whole debacle with the speakers, it's actually been a really good distracting. Probably not the distraction, probably not the healthiest distraction, but a distraction nevertheless.
All right. Well, listen, thank you to both of you. We'll be watching the chamber tonight to see what happens. That is Kadia Goba and McKay Coppins, and they both joined us tonight from D.C.